If you have an unquenchable thirst to crush your bucket list, relentlessly pursue your dreams, and live life on your own terms, then turn up the volume and tune in. You're now listening to Zeph and Moses Blacksburg on the Year of Purpose podcast.
This episode of the Year of Purpose is brought to you by our brand new book, Life Rescripted. Find your purpose and design your dream life before the curtains close. If you want to be the first in line to receive a free digital copy from me, all you have to do is head on over to www.liferescriptedbook.com to find out more. Hey everyone, this is Zeph and Blacksburg, and today I'm joined by Dave Sanderson. And Dave is the managing partner of his firm, Dave Sanderson Speaks Enterprises, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. On January 15th of 2009, he was the last person off the plane that crashed into the Hudson River, best known as the Miracle on the Hudson, and was largely responsible for making sure so many others made it out safely. In addition to speaking and training, he conducts workshops and is currently working on his next book to be released titled Moments Matter, in which he discusses how by employing 12 key resources was a main factor that turned a potential tragedy into the miracle on the Hudson, and how does one take a potential tragic experience and turn it into an opportunity to grow and contribute. So Dave, what's going on today? I found out you were a James Madison Duke with me, and we've got a lot of mutual connections, and how's today going for you?
Well, I'm excited that you're having me today. Thank you very much. And yes, go Dukes. I am a fellow James Madison University alumnus, and hopefully they'll have a good year like we're having this year.
Exactly. So I'm excited to talk to you today because your story is very unique. Obviously, planes don't crash land in the Hudson very often, let alone anywhere. Maybe just walk me through what was this day like for you just before that all happened? Was this an ordinary day? Had anything happened to you beforehand? Did you ever get any sort of feeling that maybe something could go wrong? How did it start?
Well, thank you. It was nothing extraordinary about the day. It was 11 degrees and snowing in New York City that day, but I was there for work. I was working in a distribution center that day. We were doing distribution system checks in my job as a sales manager, and the distribution center opened up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So our day got started pretty early. So we got done early, which we got done about 10 o'clock that day. And I was scheduled to be on the 5 o'clock flight. So I wasn't even scheduled to be on U.S. Airways Flight 1549 that day. So I think I was supposed to be on that plane for a reason. But when the travel agent put me on Flight 1549, nothing extraordinary. Once again, one of the first people to board because of my status, because I'm a top tier person, because I travel so much. And I just went back to my seat, but about 60 plus seconds after we took off is when I heard the explosion, and that's when it all started happening. But even then, I wasn't that startled because I fly so often. I know the planes lose engines. So, and I know a plane can fly on one engine, and we're in New York City. So you're just going to turn around and go back to the airport to get another plane. But when he crossed over the George Washington Bridge, and I looked out the window and I could actually see people's faces. That's how close he was to hitting the bridge. I knew that at that point it was probably a little bit more serious than I anticipated. And then he said his famous words, "Brace for impact." Then I actually knew that this probably wasn't going to turn out very well for us.
Wow. So was there any other major announcement other than brace for impact as to what might have happened or what was about to happen?
No, that was one of the greatest things that happened on that plane is he only said what he had to say. And he said, "This is your captain, brace for impact." Because I truly believe if he would have started telling people what was going on and explaining this is what we're going to do, people would have freaked out. But no one did anything. People were very quiet. They were really introverted at that point. I think because everybody knew at that point that if you're going to crash into the water, it's probably not going to be a very positive outcome. So I think everybody was checking in with themselves and say, okay, I better get things squared away pretty quick, whether it's with my creator or with my wife or husband. And so I think him saying the least words possible was one of the saving graces of that day.
So what are some of the things that go through your mind? Because I know that one of the mentors that I've put in place in my life is Brendan Burchard, and he always says that at the end of your life, you're going to want to know three things. Did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? And so I'm sure that if I were put into any sort of situation like that, you're probably running through a couple of different scenarios, and at the end of it, you probably want to find meaning in what's about to happen. So I'm just curious, what was it for you that was going through your mind?
Yeah, and I got to meet Brendan about 6 months ago, and I love the work that he does, and he's right. What was going through my mind once I really realized that this could be a real tragic situation, I may not be coming back, was, and I tell folks, it was really funny. Number one, I prayed. I prayed for three different things, and the last thing I prayed for is I prayed to God to forgive my sins, because I want to at least have a shot to get into heaven, right? I didn't want anything out there that might muck it up at that point. But second was the whole movie of my life was going through my mind. And when you talk to people who are on their deathbed and they may they come back and they'll tell you the same thing. It's amazing that when you think you're going to die in that last moment, you can see so many things. You have so total clarity on what your life was about and what you did in your life. And the last thought I had before we hit into the river and crashed into it was, I hope my wife pays the mortgage off. Because I told her from day one, if I die, pay the house off. That's the one thing that we haven't done yet that we need to accomplish. And then we crashed into the river. So up to that was about 70 seconds after we crossed over the George Washington Bridge until we crashed in the river. And that was one of the most surreal 70 seconds of my life.
So I'm imagining that out of this whole experience, there are a lot of learning opportunities, a lot of things that you've pulled out of it. If you could just real quickly, only because I'm familiar with the events that transpired. I hadn't necessarily heard many of the smaller details of just, what happens from, landing to rescue and being safe at home with family. Maybe if you could just real quick kind of pull me through what happened from, Captain makes this announcement to, the first time that you get to contact your family and let them know that you're okay.
Well, when we hit, first you don't think you're coming back, but all of a sudden you hit. I went back in my seat and up in my seat, and I came back up and I saw light through the window. So I knew I wasn't dead, and I knew I had a shot. But when the plane hit, the bottom of the plane was stripped off, and somebody tried to open that back door. So now you got water coming in immediately. So now you have water anywhere from ankle to waist deep, depending where you were on that plane. I was towards the back of the plane. So, all of a sudden you got water coming in. So first thing people used to say is that, I thought y'all got in the wing and went home. Well, nothing in life is that easy. So, people were going up the seats, walking down the seats, getting out of the aisle to get out. But it was my time. I went to the aisle. But when I hit the aisle, something happened that changed everything. And I heard my mother speaking to me in my head. And my mother passed away in 1997. But there was something she would tell me when I was a child that popped into my head, and was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And that's the last thing I heard from my mother on that plane. It's like, okay, what's the right thing to do? And I grew up playing sports, and I was in fraternity, and I was always about the guys, right? You always took care of the guys. So that's why I waited in the back of the plane to make sure we got everybody out before I made my way out, because I was all right. I knew physically I could get out. Other people weren't that fortunate. The other people were having some challenges getting out because of where they were and just the logistics of it all. But once we got everybody out, I got to going up to 10F to get out myself, and all of a sudden I looked up and there was no room on the wing or the boat for me. So I couldn't get out of the plane. That's why I was waist deep in the 36-degree water for about 7 minutes on that plane. And I was actually holding on. There's a picture that was shown on Good Morning America. That was the first picture that was shown from the plane crash of me holding on to the lifeboat. And the reason why is because the river, the Hudson River, got a very fast current, and the plane was actually floating down the river. Well, as the plane was floating down the river, the little lifeboat was also floating out into the river. And no one, including myself, no one reads the instructions, right? Who reads the instructions? It's actually tethered to the plane. But no one knew that, so they kept yelling, hold on, hold on. That's why I held on to the little lifeboat as close as I could to the wing for about 6-7 minutes so people could start getting off in the wing and moving down. And that's how my story started, because I was on the plane for 7 additional minutes, waist deep in 36-degree water, holding on to the lifeboat until it was my time to go. And then I went to the New Jersey side of the river. And it was just because of the way the plane was positioned. The left side of the plane was facing Manhattan, right side was facing Hoboken, or the New Jersey side. I went out right. I'm going to Jersey, and that's how I ended up in New Jersey. And those folks did a tremendous job, because they had to pick me up and carry me to the triage center because I couldn't walk. I was, once you're out, you can do a lot of things. I tell people on adrenaline, you can go all day. But as soon as you're out, I couldn't feel a thing. I've been in the water now 7-8 minutes.
Right.
So I couldn't move. So that's how I got there, and that's how I got to the triage center. I ultimately got to the hospital, but I didn't talk to my wife, Zeph, until 11 o'clock that night because it took about 5 hours for me to warm my body up. My body was so cold; it was 94 degrees, and it was so cold that they had to warm it up, slowly, but they had to get me back to that level. And it took them about 5 hours till they got me back up to room temperature, basically.
Wow.
So I didn't talk to my wife till about 11 o'clock that night. And then at that point, I heard her story about what was going on at home, which was probably as exciting and not more exciting than what I was going on, because she had to deal with all the media
Oh, man.
at home.
So they knew already that you were on the plane and they had contacted her.
What happened was, and I found out when I got back, is I did an interview that night from the hospital bed with Katie Couric.
Wow.
And she interviewed me, and and I was on CBS, but my wife doesn't watch CBS. But what happens when somebody did called my wife and said, "Hey, your husband's alive. He's on CBS." And all of a sudden, once your name is out, they can Google you any place, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, ABC, CBS, and Fox show up at the house with cameras, wanting to interview my wife, who knew nothing. Right? She had just gotten home, and she's clueless on what's going on. So she has a whole nother story, which I would love her to tell one day, about how to handle media when you don't know what the heck's going on. So
That's a pretty important skill to have, because I'm sure that happens very often for a lot of people.
It does, with hurricanes and tornadoes and all the other things that are going on, and people getting hit all the time with media, and you don't know how to handle it. I think she did a tremendous job just not knowing anything and handling that. But that's how I got to my wife initially, and I got back the next day in Charlotte, and that's when I first saw my family, when I got back that next day.
So I've done, and this is no comparison whatsoever, but I've competed in the Tough Mudder races. So I've jumped into a Holloway dumpster filled with ice, cooled down to 34 degrees, had to swim across underneath barbed wire, and I'm in there maybe all of 20 seconds and thinking that I'm going to die because, all of your muscles seize up. I mean,
your lungs tighten, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the initial shock hits you within the first 2 or 3 seconds, especially when it's that cold. So to hear that you were able to make it through for such a long period of time, and for some people listening in, they might think 7 minutes isn't that long. Trust me, if you jump in that type of water, it's enough to kill anybody. I have to imagine that you have a very tough mindset inside, or a very sound mindset that has allowed you to stay calm in situations like this, and I'm sure that plays out into tons of other areas of your life. Have you found that your sense of grit that you have has really driven you to do more things outside of that situation that have
most
driven
definitely
your success?
Most definitely. I had the honor and privilege of being the head of security for a gentleman named Tony Robbins for 5 years. I was assistant for another 5 years. For 10 years, I was with Tony, traveling with him all over the world. And you get that mindset, right? That you can basically do anything if you control the way you manage your mind. And he calls it state management. And that's one of the things I talk about now, is how to manage your state in the appropriate way at the appropriate time, which is a skill set that everybody could have, but few people really employ. So, one thing that this gave me is a strong reference to being able to handle anything. And so and life is not easy. I mean, there's things being thrown at you all the time, whether it's financial, relationships, whatever it may be, and you got to deal with it. And beforehand, I dealt with it. I probably dealt with it okay, but now I deal with it with a whole different level of certainty. And one of the things I talk about that day is the level of certainty you have when something's going on it can really help you turn out a positive outcome, whether it's the way the captain spoke with certainty, whether people handled with certainty. And it's that the one thing I've learned in my life is the person with the most certainty in a room is the one who's going to be seen as the leader. He or she will be the one making the decisions, because everybody will gravitate to certainty because everybody's got so much uncertainty. And that's why this country is the way it is right now. It's because there's so much uncertainty. And they're looking for someone who is certain. So you look on why things are turning out the way they are. It's because the person who speaks with the most certainty is who you gravitate to. So I think certainty was one of the biggest points of reference I came out with on that day.
I could definitely see how that has a huge impact on you. And along those same lines, I'm thinking you've got to have some serious focus to stay, in the moment, in the present, and be very conscious and aware of what's happening around you. I recently have told a couple people I had my identity stolen about 2 weeks ago, and along with credit cards, this was actually a full-on, I was getting hacked from all fronts. I had flown to Los Angeles. A couple hours after landing, my phone gets shut down, my computer gets erased remotely and shut down, all of my banks, credit cards, everything gone within a matter of about 20 minutes. And so, you know, for me, I found one of the biggest things was to sit there and say, okay, you know, here's what's happening. Here's the reality of my situation. Here are the only things I can do, and here are the things that I can't change right now. And just kind of moving forward from there. And I'm sure you probably had a moment where you're like, all right, like, here's the reality of where we're at, and I'm just going to keep holding on to that life raft.
Yeah, the one thing I call it the power of focus in that moment, right? Because it's, you know, people like me who were in a corporate world before where I am at now, I'm an entrepreneur now, is it candidly, things happen for a reason. And I was always living in the future. Okay, what's my next week? What's my next week? Because corporate people are like, what's my next step up, right? Step up. But what you realize after you face some potential challenges or a crisis, or what I call your personal plane crash, whether it's a heart attack, stroke, whatever it may be, is all of a sudden, you know, you get back to the present, you know, and you focus in on the power of the present. And that's why you talk to people who survive things like I and everybody else did that day. If you can focus in on that present moment, right? Okay, don't look at something any worse than it is. Look at it as it is and deal with it as it is. And that's why I try to tell people that day we all dealt with it as it was, because it could have been a lot more tragedy than it was. This thing could have gone a whole different direction, but people focused. And the only thing I could tell about Sullenberger, I think one of the greatest skills that he showed that day was the power of focus. And when you have 6 minutes to make a decision on what you're going to do with 155 people's plus lives, and you can focus in on that moment, and then more importantly, execute and not lose it, right? That's a tremendous skill set that I gained from him that day, is the power of focusing in on that present second, that present moment. That's why my next book's being called Moments Matter.
I think that's a great title for that book, and I'll be one of the first people in line to get that when that's out. So definitely be sure to let me know when that goes out. And I myself am working on a book too, and it's going to be called Life Rescripted, and it's about examining your life from a different lens, from the story standpoint, and what it's like if your life were the movie, and who are the people you're casting for the movie, and realizing that you are the director, you are the producer, and you're in charge. So I'm very excited for that one as well. So I'll have to share.
Sounds like an interesting concept. I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, so I'll send that to you when that's ready. Yep. So what's changed for you since all this has happened? You said a little bit there that you left the corporate world. Was that related to these events? Was that before or after? When did that all happen?
Indirectly. It happened about 4 years after. And candidly, I wanted to leave immediately after, but I still had a wife and kids in college and and expenses and health insurance to pay for. But it really started turning about a week afterwards, but it sort of hit me in the face on two different occasions. First occasion was the year anniversary of the plane crash when we released our first book, which I was a contributing, person with. I wrote a chapter, which is not that big of a deal, but I wrote a chapter. But we're doing a book launch at the Barnes & Noble in New York City, which was a tremendous place to do in Times Square. But we were talking, sort of sharing stories. I found out my company basically didn't do anything. They didn't even call me that night, where other companies were flying people in to help them and make sure they had clothes and give them time off. And my company basically said, "Are you going to go back to work next week? You're going to fly to Michigan next week?" So that's when I first said, okay, you know what? I'm just a number, but I still had to have a job. But fast forward about 3.5 years later, and it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and I was trying to finalize a transaction. I was working with someone from Costa Rica and somebody over in India, right? It's a global world, and I was working with a lot of these people. But when I needed help here locally, everybody else already gone on Thanksgiving vacation. Here I'm the one that's doing it, and everybody else would get paid. I'm like, this isn't right. And so I threw my phone, which is right behind me. I broke it. I said, I got to get out of here. I'm going to die. I'm going to die of stress. And that's when I made a decision to leave, and I left about 2.5 months later.
Well, congratulations on making that decision. I know that many people have made that decision, and a lot of people listening are considering making that decision. Yep. What else has changed in your life? What sort of lessons have you pulled away from all this that could be helpful in others designing their own future, on their own terms?
Yeah. Well, one thing that was a stark change in my life is the way I managed my time. And as you may have gleaned, as some of the things I've shared, is I was driven. I was a top producer in every company I was with, and I focused to make sure that like my dad did, make sure you take care of your family, right? That's the number one thing you do. Make sure they have what they need. So you work, 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 work. And there were times when I wasn't around, especially for my eldest daughters, times in school, and she and I were butting heads at that point. We were not really doing well, and people tell me, well, 17 girls can get that way, but I think a lot of it was either that and plus I wasn't there for her. But after the plane crash, I realized, you know what? I can't. I gotta be there for my family. I can't keep working at this pace and working for somebody else's glory. I got to take care of my family. And the only way I can do that is working for myself and controlling my time. So now the biggest change is I manage my time around my family events, and then everything else goes around it. And that's why the summers are tough, because the kids are home. So now they're back at school. This is great. But no, I schedule time management around my family, which has changed tremendous the relationships that I've had within my kids and my wife. That's probably the major thing. But second is knowing that, Kaylee, I have a story, but how my whole goal every day is how can I impact one more person? That's part of it. But the other part is and enjoy the process, because a lot of people forget that second part of it. And that's what I try to teach people. And when I talk and speak and do my workshops, and part of the book's going to be about, is you can make these goals all day long, which I did, but I never enjoyed the process. So now if you put it together and enjoy the process, it's a whole different framework on how you approach something, and get so much more creativity on how to do it. And I talk about the skill of resourcefulness, and that's the one skill set that I think that brought me that day together. I think it taught a lot of people. But I was so resourceful as I look back, and I was telling my story to people who were taking notes, is all these little resources that I used that day. When I yelled at the lady on the wing, because I needed to change her state the way she was looking at things because she was stifled, or having multiple pathways when the seats broke, people got resourceful. That skill set was probably the major skill set that got everybody through that day. So now I talk about that and teach how to be resourceful when you think you have limited resources. And that's why the book Moments Matter, we write these 12 resources that I and others use that day, and you can use in your life or use in your business, that when times get tough, all of a sudden, okay, I got to anticipate. Anticipation was a key skill set that day. We all had to anticipate what the next move may have been, or if someone might have been injured, or Captain Sullivan had to anticipate if I don't get it down just right, I'm going to topple into New York City or topple into New Jersey. Everybody had to anticipate. So how can you use that skill set not only in your personal life, but the business life, to hopefully get to another place especially with entrepreneurs, who are nothing's certain with entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And I think having that sort of street smarts in a sense is so helpful in any obstacle that comes up in your life. I mean, I know for me, back to the identity theft issue, was my problem was I'm stuck in California. I have no communication,
Yep.
and I've got no money to book a plane, at least to get back home to safety in a sense. But using some quick thinking, I realized I'm much like you. I fly a lot. I had a lot of Sky Miles saved. I actually was able to book a free flight using my Sky Miles points because that was one of the accounts that did not get compromised. So it's that quick thinking that really can get you out of a bind if you're in that type of a situation.
Yep.
Looking back on all of this, obviously a tragedy turned into triumph. It was an extremely successful day in the sense that it could have gone far south much quicker, and it didn't. So I'm just curious to hear from you, what advice do you have for people who either A, are in that sort of woe is me, think that their life is always a tragedy, or maybe people really did experience a tragedy, for example, losing a loved one or something of that nature. How can you transform that and change that into a winning mindset?
Great question. And I want to refer you back to an interview I did last year for a magazine by the name of AARP. And they interviewed me, and Kaylee, I was questioning, why are they going to interview me? I mean, I'm 50 plus, but it's like, what can I contribute to that? And what the article was about is this, just that question you asked is, why do some people go through depression or PTSD? Whether it's military people or someone who goes through a crisis, a fire, or a loss of a loved one. And why do some people go through what's called PTGS, post-traumatic growth syndrome? And that's what I went through. And so there must be a reason why some people grow and some people get depressed. There's got to be a strategy behind it. And so that was what the article was about. And I really started thinking through it about the different strategies I've used to take that pathway instead of depression into growth. And there are a few different things that you need to focus on. Definitely one is thinking more than yourself. You got to have a mission in life. It's more than yourself. The people that I've talked to who have PTSD or are in that challenging state. And there were some people on the plane that had depression. They lost their job. They were not in a good space because they focused on, why did this happen to me? Why does this happen to people like me all the time? I can't get a break, instead of, how can I contribute? How can I give back? I have gratitude. Where can I focus? So, the way I did it was go out and speak and focus on giving back to the Red Cross, making sure that they could have the money they needed for someone who else was going through a tragedy, whether it was Haiti or tornado or Superstorm Sandy, whatever it may have been. That's why I did it. And that's one of the key strategies, is focusing not on yourself, focusing on how can you give to somebody else. And then all of a sudden you change their perspective. I talk to a lot of military guys and gals, when they come back, who are going through that questionable stage. Now they're back. What are they going to do? And they're depressed because they've had structure all their life, and now all of a sudden they have no structure, and they've gone through something. And I tell them to go out and get it out. I tell them, go out and speak about it, whether it's a church, whether it's a United Way function, whatever it may be. Talk to people like you on podcasts. Get it out, because the more you get it out, the more you can start processing in your mind. It's like, you know what? Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, I was lucky I made it, but I did make it. And now how can I add value to somebody else who's maybe in that same situation? All of a sudden you're thinking about somebody else. That's one of the key strategies I talk about and teach about, and taking it from PTSD to PTGS, post-traumatic growth syndrome.
I think that's a great analogy. Not acronym is the proper word for that. And I'd have to say that this has been an amazing discussion, just to hear your story, to hear what you've been through. I'm sure even 10 years from now, you'll look back even further and say that all the events that transpired and the person that you've become are, thanks to all of the situations that have happened in your life, whether good or bad.
Yep.
So, we can never really connect the dots until we look back years down the road. But it's really great to hear your story and to see, just how far you've come in this short period of time. Any lasting words of wisdom, just overall about life and the meaning of life, or, living purposefully and making sure that every moment counts?
I just think that I thank you very much, and I really appreciate the time today to fellow James Madison University Duke. I would just say, when this advice was given to me years ago, and it was in a different sort of context, but the gentleman told me, when you're given the opportunity to lead, that's what he told me, lead. When you're given the opportunity to speak, speak. When you're given opportunities in life, take advantage of the opportunities. And that's probably the number one thing I tell people now. He goes, you have opportunities all the time around you, but most people don't take advantage of them. They're either scared or they don't know they're too worried about their way they're going to be perceived. But I tell you what, when you take that chance, take that step, take that pathway, which I talk about pathways in my talks, is take the path, because you don't know where it's going to lead. All of a sudden, something happens like this, and I could have taken a whole different pathway. But I took a pathway to go out and serve, and all of a sudden I'm speaking with you, I'm with Katie Couric, I'm on Fox TV, I'm doing so many different things. My next book's coming out, I'm in a couple movies that are coming out, because I took a pathway. When given the opportunity, take it, because you never know, it may lead you to a whole different place and a whole different network of people. And my first mentor told me, I'll end with this, my first mentor, but he was back in the early 90s. One of the greatest pieces of advice he gave me, when I asked him, I said, I want to be a leader. And he said, the fastest way to get anything in life is to put yourself around the peer group of the kind of people you want to be, because they will elevate you to that peer group. And that's how I started my mission and my travels to become a business manager, a business leader. And that's how all of a sudden leadership started to come, because I put myself around those kind of people. Put yourself around peer groups of the kind of people you want to be, and they will elevate you to that level. And that was one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got.
I think that's the best way to round off this episode. I mean, I know I've paid a lot of attention to the people that I surround myself with. My attitude changes based on who I'm with. My success changes based on who I'm with. And you really are the sum of the 5, and if not the 3 people that you hang out with the most. So I definitely agree with that 100%. And it's been great talking to you. What's the best way for people to keep track of you and where your book is, and get some information when the new book comes out and things like that?
That's great. Well, thank you. Number one, my website is DaveSandersonSpeaks.com. I give updates, and you'll see where I'm going to be. And if you're in the area, what I would ask you to do, I have a little thing comes, let's talk. go in there, fill it out, and say, Dave, I hear you're going to be in Baltimore speaking. Can I come and hear you speak? I will respond, and I'll put you on my guest list. I do that all the time, and I'm going all over the North America over the next 3 months. So if you see where I'm going, please reach out on my website, and I'll be more than happy to invite you. Second, I love Facebook. I never thought that I would, but I do. And my Dave Sanderson Speaks is my page, and I would love for people to check out, because that's where I put my latest updates. Twitter, I do Dave Sanderson too, and that's my daily sort of thought of the day, or hey, this is what somebody else told me, try it out. Twitter is Dave Sanderson too, but the one that I'm getting a lot of feedback now is LinkedIn, and it's amazingly especially in the business world. So my LinkedIn, I'm doing an article twice now. It's once to twice a week on LinkedIn. It's under David Sanderson. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me. My book called Moments Matter, our ebook is going to be #1 out, and we're focusing in on October to get that out, and then the official book launch of the physical book. Right now, it's up for we're looking back at some dates, but right now we're trying to sort of time it around January 15th, because that's when the next movie that I'm going to be involved with, called Miracles on the Hudson, will be released in New York City in January. So we're probably going to time the official book launch to be in the New York City area, the tri-state area, around that time frame when the Miracles on the Hudson movie will be released. So that's a little bit of what's going on with me, and I love interacting with people. So please reach out to me, and I will definitely get back to you personally.
Very cool, Dave, and thanks so much for spending time with me today. And we're headed into Fridays tomorrow, so the weekend is almost here, and excited to get some nice relaxation over the weekend. So thanks for being here today, and I hope to keep in touch with you.
Same here. Thank you very much.
This episode of The Year of Purpose is brought to you by our brand new book, Life Rescripted. Find your purpose and design your dream life before the curtains close. If you want to be the first in line to receive a free digital copy from me, all you have to do is head on over to www.liferescriptedbook.com to find out more. I've discovered what I think is the world's most effective process to design your path in life. It'd be a shame if I didn't share it. In Life Rescripted, you will discover the #1 strategy for determining your life purpose and how you can start a new path today, the 5X life hack rule for accomplishing your dreams and designing your life on your own terms 5 times faster, the ultimate solution for fear and how you can leverage it right now to make this year your best year yet, and so much more. Reserve your spot in line to get a free copy at www.liferescriptedbook.com, and I will see you in the next episode.